Introduction. Welcome to Train Your Brain for Success, a journey that is not simply about acquiring new information or chasing external achievements, but about fundamentally rewiring the way you think, the way you act, and the way you see yourself in the world, because true success, the kind that endures setbacks, that withstands rejection, that grows deeper with every challenge, is not something that happens to you by luck or accident. It is something that happens through the deliberate training and transformation of your mind. You have been taught, perhaps without even realizing it, that success is mostly external, a matter of the right opportunities, the right connections, the right circumstances. But the deeper truth, the one that separates those who rise from those who remain stuck, is that success begins first and foremost within your own mind, within the silent conversations you have with yourself, within the beliefs you choose to build or dismantle, within the daily choices that either reinforce your power or quietly surrender it. Your brain is not fixed, not static, not bound by the limits of the past unless you choose to leave it that way. It is plastic, it is alive, it is capable of learning, growing, reshaping itself at every age, every stage, every turning point, but only if you decide to step out of the patterns that no longer serve you and into a new, conscious, disciplined way of thinking that aligns not with your fears, but with your highest vision of who you are capable of becoming. This audiobook is not about hollow motivation or fleeting inspiration. It is about deep, sustainable transformation, about understanding how your brain works at its core, and about taking ownership of the thoughts, the habits, the emotional responses that either build your future or sabotage it, often without you even noticing. You will learn that success is not something you wait for, not something you stumble into if you're lucky enough, but something you engineer, something you create brick by brick, decision by decision, thought by thought, until the life you once only dreamed about becomes the life you live every day. Not because you force the world to change, but because you change the one thing you always had full control over, your own mind. You will discover how to identify and dismantle the thought patterns that have kept you trapped, how to replace fear-based programming with confidence and resilience, how to train your mind to expect solutions instead of problems, growth instead of defeat, progress instead of paralysis, and how to build an internal identity so strong that no external setback can permanently break your momentum. This journey will not always be easy, because rewiring your brain means confronting old stories, old fears, old excuses that have grown comfortable in their familiarity. But it will be worth it, because the cost of staying stuck is far greater than the discomfort of change, and the life that awaits you on the other side of this work is bigger, freer, and more powerful than anything fear has tried to convince you to settle for. So as you move through these chapters, I challenge you not to just listen passively, not to just consume these words as information, but to engage actively, to reflect deeply, to practice relentlessly, to become a participant in your own transformation, because your brain is listening to the choices you make, and with every repetition, with every new thought, with every new action, you're training yourself either for success or for stagnation. Today, you choose a different path. Today, you step into the role of architect, of builder, of creator. Today, you begin the work of training your brain not for survival, not for mere existence, but for success, real success, lasting success, the kind that changes not just your outcomes, but your identity, your possibilities, and the way you move through the world from this moment forward. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Understand how your mind shapes your reality. If you want to achieve lasting success, the kind that not only creates external victories, but transforms your inner world into a steady, powerful engine of growth, resilience, and fulfillment, you must first understand that your mind is not a passive observer of your life. It is the creator of your experience, the architect of your outcomes, the lens through which every possibility is either expanded or diminished. And until you take control of how your mind perceives, interprets, and responds to the world, you will continue to live at the mercy of unconscious programming that was often shaped without your consent. Most people move through life believing that what happens to them determines how they feel, how they think, and what they are capable of doing. But the truth, the liberating, empowering, sometimes terrifying truth, is that it is not the events themselves, but the meaning you assign to them, the beliefs you build around them, the interpretations you weave into your identity that shape your reality, your emotions, your actions, and ultimately, your results. Your brain is a meaning-making machine, constantly processing, filtering, and categorizing every piece of information you encounter based on your existing beliefs, biases, and emotional habits. And because this process happens so quickly, so automatically, you often mistake your interpretations for facts, your assumptions for truths, your limitations for laws of nature. But they are not facts, they are stories, and stories can be rewritten the moment you decide to take the pen back into your own hands. At the heart of this process is a powerful scientific truth. Your brain is plastic, meaning it is capable of changing its structure, its wiring, its default patterns throughout your entire life. Not just in childhood, not just in moments of trauma, but every day through conscious repetition, emotional engagement, and deliberate focus. And this process, called neuroplasticity, means that you are never trapped, never stuck, never permanently wired for failure unless you choose to be. Your current patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting are not who you are. They are simply who you have practiced being. And just as you once unknowingly practiced fear, self-doubt, procrastination, or small thinking, you can now, with intention and persistence, practice confidence, action, resilience, creativity, and the mental models that lead to real, sustainable success. But before you can rewire your brain for success, you must first become aware of how your current wiring shapes your reality. Because the greatest enemy of growth is not failure. It is unconsciousness, the passive acceptance of patterns that no longer serve you, the unexamined beliefs that limit what you try, what you dare to hope for, what you're willing to reach toward when opportunities arise. You must begin to observe your thoughts with curiosity, not judgment, noticing how often your mind jumps to worst-case scenarios, how quickly it assumes rejection, defeat, or scarcity, how easily it discounts your own abilities and magnifies your flaws. Because these habitual thought patterns are not harmless. They're the architects of your choices, the designers of your emotional landscape, the silent engineers of a life lived smaller than it was meant to be. The good news, the life-changing news, is that what has been wired through repetition can be rewired through conscious repetition. That what has been reinforced through fear can be reshaped through courage. That the neural pathways that once pulled you toward hesitation, avoidance, and self-sabotage can be replaced with pathways that pull you naturally toward action, belief, and resilience. But only if you are willing to do the work of training your mind with the same dedication and patience you would bring to training your body, or mastering a new skill. You must also understand that the mind loves certainty. It clings to familiar patterns, even painful ones, because familiarity feels safe to the primitive parts of the brain that evolved to prioritize survival over growth. And this means that when you begin to challenge old beliefs, when you start thinking new thoughts, when you step outside the comfort zone of your established neural pathways, your mind will resist, will protest, will generate fear, doubt, and discomfort, not because you're on the wrong path, but because you are on the unfamiliar path. Growth feels wrong before it feels right. And if you do not understand this, if you do not expect this, you will misinterpret the discomfort of neural rewiring as a sign to stop, to retreat, to stay in the mental cages you have outgrown. But if you understand it, you can endure it, you can lean into it, you can persist through it, knowing that every time you choose a higher thought, every time you interrupt an old pattern, every time you act from belief instead of fear, you're literally reshaping the physical structure of your brain, creating new connections that will, in time, become your new normal. Your reality is not determined by external events. It is determined by the internal meaning you assign to those events, by the thoughts you choose to focus on, by the emotions you choose to fuel, by the identity you choose to reinforce through repetition. And when you change your mind, when you retrain your brain, you change not just how you feel or how you act. You change the trajectory of your entire life. This is why two people can experience the same setback and respond in completely different ways. One sees failure as a final verdict on their worth and quits, while the other sees failure as feedback, as a lesson, as a temporary obstacle to overcome on the path to mastery. Because it is not the setback itself that determines the future, it is the story they tell themselves about the setback, the meaning they assign, the emotional energy they attach to it, and ultimately, the actions they choose to take next. You have that same power. The power to reinterpret your past, to reframe your present, to reimagine your future, not through delusion or fantasy, but through the disciplined, daily practice of training your brain to expect success, to pursue solutions, to seek growth, to choose belief over doubt, courage over fear, resilience over resignation. Success, then, is not about luck or circumstances. It is about perception, about interpretation, about the silent agreements you make with yourself about what is possible, what is permissible, what is worth fighting for even when the odds seem stacked against you. And those agreements, those mental contracts, are yours to rewrite at any time. It begins with awareness. It deepens with repetition. It solidifies through action, and it expands through persistence. As you continue through this journey, remember this. You are not stuck with the mind you have. You are shaping the mind you live with every day through what you focus on, what you believe, what you reinforce, and every small decision to think differently, to feel differently, to act differently is a vote for the future you are creating. You are the architect. You are the builder. You are the master of the one instrument that determines your success more than any external force ever could, your own mind. And the work of training, it begins now. Chapter 2. Break old thought patterns that keep you stuck. If you truly want to train your brain for success, if you're serious about stepping into a version of yourself that acts, thinks, and creates from a place of strength and possibility, then you must be willing to confront the truth that so much of what holds you back is not rooted in external limitations, but in the invisible, unchallenged thought patterns that you have repeated so often, so automatically, that they have become your mental default. And unless you disrupt those patterns, unless you actively dismantle them, they will continue to quietly sabotage your growth no matter how much you wish for change. Old thought patterns are like well-worn trails in the forest of your mind, pathways that have been carved out over years of repetition, often beginning in childhood, shaped by the voices of parents, teachers, media, and early experiences that taught you what to expect from yourself, from others, and from the world. And though some of those patterns may have once served a purpose, protecting you from rejection, shielding you from failure, helping you navigate a confusing world, they now stand as barriers, no longer keeping you safe, but keeping you small. These patterns often take the form of limiting beliefs, deeply embedded assumptions about what you're capable of, what you deserve, what is possible for someone like you. And because they are so ingrained, you rarely question them. Instead, you build your goals, your actions, your life itself around the invisible walls they create, mistaking self-imposed ceilings for natural limits, mistaking old survival strategies for absolute truths. You may carry the belief that you are not smart enough, not talented enough, not connected enough to succeed at the highest levels. You may carry the belief that success is for other people, people who are luckier, more privileged, more deserving. You may carry the belief that it is safer to dream small and avoid disappointment than to risk reaching higher and falling. You may carry the belief that past failures are permanent evidence of your future potential. And each of these beliefs, whether spoken aloud or whispered silently inside your mind, acts like a leash, a quiet force that pulls you back every time you start to move forward, every time you start to believe in something bigger. The first step in breaking these patterns is awareness. And awareness requires brutal honesty, the willingness to sit with your thoughts long enough to recognize the stories you have been telling yourself. Not the stories you tell the world, not the polished narratives you post online, but the raw, unfiltered narratives that run underneath your decisions, your hesitations, your fears. Begin by noticing the automatic thoughts that arise when you face a new opportunity, when you're challenged, when you fail, when you succeed. What is the first story your mind offers you? Does it say, I can figure this out? Or does it say, I'm not good enough? Does it say, this is a chance to grow? Or does it say, better not try, better not risk it? Does it say, I deserve this success? Or does it say, who do you think you are? These patterns are often so subtle, so habitual, that you must slow down. You must become the observer of your own mind, catching the scripts as they play, questioning the assumptions they are built on, refusing to accept them simply because they feel familiar. The next step is to challenge these beliefs with evidence, because your mind clings to what feels true, not what is objectively true, and you must give it new evidence. You must retrain it to see not just the failures and flaws, but the strengths, the victories, the resilience you have shown again and again, even when you are not perfect, even when you doubted yourself. If your mind says, I'm a failure, bring forward the moments you succeeded, the times you persevered, the risks you took, the lessons you learned. If your mind says, I'm not capable, recall the obstacles you have overcome, the skills you have built, the growth you have already achieved. If your mind says, I always mess things up, point to the evidence of times you got it right, times you figured it out, times you adapted and rose stronger. You are not the sum of your worst moments. You are the result of every time you chose to keep going, every time you chose to grow, every time you chose to believe in something bigger than your fear, even when that belief was fragile, even when it was faint. Breaking old thought patterns also requires emotional rewiring, because many of your limiting beliefs are not just cognitive. They are emotional habits, emotional memories wired into your nervous system, and you cannot simply argue your way out of them logically. You must feel your way into a new emotional reality. This means practicing feeling emotions like hope, pride, excitement, gratitude, not waiting for external circumstances to justify them, but generating them intentionally, daily, until your nervous system begins to associate growth, risk, and success not with fear and shame, but with joy, with freedom, with possibility. It means rehearsing success emotionally before it arrives physically, embodying the feelings of confidence, resilience, and victory even when the world has not yet caught up with your internal transformation, because the brain, brilliant as it is, responds to emotional rehearsal as powerfully as it responds to physical experience. And the more you practice feeling successful, the more you prime your brain to expect success, to seek success, to create success. Another powerful strategy is language replacement, because the words you speak, especially the words you speak to yourself, are not harmless. They are instructions to your subconscious. They're commands that either reinforce the old patterns or carve out new ones. Replace, I can't with I'm learning. Replace, this is too hard with this is stretching me. Replace, I always mess up with every step is teaching me. Replace, I'm not good at this with I'm getting better every day. It will feel unnatural at first, forced even, because you're fighting against years of habitual wiring, but with repetition, with persistence, with emotional engagement, these new words will build new beliefs, and new beliefs will drive new behaviors, and new behaviors will create a new reality. Finally, understand that breaking old thought patterns is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice, a lifelong commitment to mental discipline, because the old paths are easy, familiar, deeply worn, and when you're tired, stressed, or discouraged, your mind will want to return to them, will want to slide back into the comfort of self-pity, self-doubt, and smallness. But you're not here to live small. You're not here to be ruled by fear. You're not here to repeat the past. You are here to create something new, something bold, something worthy of the dreams that still burn inside you even when fear tries to smother them. Every time you catch yourself thinking an old, limiting thought and choose a new, empowering one, you are breaking the chains a little more. Every time you act from belief instead of fear, you're carving a new path in your brain. Every time you refuse to surrender to the old story, you are writing a new one. And over time, with practice, with patience, with persistence, The new story becomes the dominant story, the dominant feeling, the dominant experience. And the life you once only dreamed of becomes the life you live. You're not your past. You are not your fears. You are not your old patterns. You are possibility. You are power. You are proof that the mind can change, and that with it, everything else can too. Chapter 3. Build new mental habits for growth. Once you have begun to break the old thought patterns that have kept you stuck, once you have torn down the walls built by fear, doubt, and self-imposed limitations, the next step, the step that will determine the future you create from this point forward, is to build new mental habits that anchor you in growth, that reinforce the mindset of possibility, resilience, and daily progress. Because success is never the result of one grand decision or one lucky break. It is the inevitable outcome of the small, often invisible habits that shape your thinking every single day. You must understand that the brain loves efficiency, that it seeks to automate whatever patterns you repeat most often, whether those patterns serve your highest good or your lowest fear. And because of this, your job is to consciously and deliberately install patterns that serve the life you want to build, to make growth, not survival, the default operating system of your mind. Building new mental habits begins with recognizing that every thought you entertain, every emotion you fuel, every internal narrative you repeat is either reinforcing a future you desire or pulling you back toward the past you're trying to outgrow. And there is no such thing as a neutral thought, no such thing as a harmless complaint, no such thing as an idle moment of self-doubt left unchecked, because over time, these small moments weave the fabric of your identity, your actions, and, ultimately, your destiny. To build a mind wired for growth, you must start by creating habits of awareness. The habit of noticing when you slip into scarcity thinking, when you default to worst-case scenarios, when you criticize yourself harshly without reason, when you magnify problems instead of seeking solutions, because you cannot change what you refuse to see, and awareness is the first act of power in the process of transformation. Make it a daily practice, even just for 5 minutes a day, to check in with your mind, not with judgment, not with panic, but with curiosity, with compassion, asking yourself, what am I thinking right now? Is this thought moving me toward the person I want to become, or pulling me back into the person I am trying to leave behind? Is this thought empowering me to act, or paralyzing me with fear? By practicing this awareness consistently, you begin to catch the small negative spirals before they gain momentum. You begin to interrupt the automatic patterns that once seemed unstoppable, and every interruption, no matter how small, weakens the old pathways and strengthens the space needed to build new ones. The next mental habit to build is the habit of solution-focused thinking, the habit of training your brain not to ruminate endlessly on problems, but to pivot quickly into possibilities, into creative thinking, into action. Because while most people waste their energy replaying everything that went wrong, everything that could go wrong, those who train their brains for success quickly acknowledge the challenge and immediately shift their focus to what can be done, what can be learned, what new. Strategy can be deployed. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, how can I grow from this? Instead of asking, what if I fail? Ask, what if I succeed beyond my expectations? Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Ask, what strengths can I bring to this challenge? It is not about denying reality or pretending that problems do not exist. It is about refusing to dwell in a state of helplessness, about refusing to marinate in fear and frustration, about choosing to cultivate a bias for solutions, for creativity, for resourcefulness, a bias that, over time, becomes the natural, automatic response of your mind in the face of difficulty. Another critical mental habit for growth is practicing optimism. Not blind, naive optimism, but grounded, disciplined optimism that recognizes the challenges ahead and still chooses to believe in the possibility of a favorable outcome, that sees setbacks and still chooses to believe in progress, that acknowledges fear and still chooses to act in hope. Optimism is not a personality trait you either have or don't have. It is a mental muscle you can train, a lens you can polish, a way of seeing the world that must be reinforced daily through deliberate focus on what is working, on what is possible, on the opportunities hidden within the obstacles. Make it a habit to consciously seek out the positive angles in your experiences, to deliberately focus on gratitude, to celebrate small wins, to remind yourself daily of the progress you are making, no matter how incremental it may seem, because what you focus on expands, and when you train your brain to focus on growth, growth becomes inevitable. It is also essential to build the mental habit of emotional regulation. The ability to recognize when you are slipping into fear, anger, frustration, or overwhelm, and to consciously bring yourself back into a state of clarity, calm, and centeredness. Because success is not built by those who never feel negative emotions, but by those who learn not to be ruled by them, not to let fleeting feelings dictate long-term actions. Develop rituals for resetting your mind when you're triggered. Deep breathing, mindfulness, movement, reflection. Simple, powerful practices that ground you, that break the emotional spiral before it becomes a mental hurricane. Because the quicker you can return to clarity, the quicker you can resume purposeful action. And perhaps most powerfully, build the mental habit of self-encouragement. The daily, conscious choice to speak to yourself with kindness, with patience, with belief, especially when you stumble, especially when you doubt, especially when progress feels slow, because the voice you hear most often is your own, and you must make it a voice that lifts you rather than drags you down. Every morning, set the intention to encourage yourself through the day's challenges. Every night, acknowledge the wins, the small acts of courage, the small steps taken. Reinforce the identity of someone who grows, someone who persists, someone who is becoming stronger every single day. Understand that mental habits, like physical habits, are built through repetition, through emotional reinforcement, through patience. And at first, the old habits will feel louder, stronger, more natural, but every time you choose awareness over autopilot, solutions over problems, optimism over fear, regulation over reactivity, encouragement over criticism, you are carving out new pathways, laying down new tracks, building a new default setting for your mind. A setting wired for growth, for success, for resilience. And with time, these habits will no longer feel forced. They will feel like home. They will no longer be something you have to do. They will be who you are. They will no longer be a struggle. They will be your strength. You are not at the mercy of your past patterns. You are the builder of new ones. You are the trainer of your own mind. You are the architect of your own success. And every day you practice these new habits, you step further away from who you were and closer to who you are becoming. A version of yourself capable of achieving, creating, and sustaining success at levels your old self could hardly imagine. The brain you want is the brain you build, one thought, one habit, one choice at a time. Chapter 4. Program your mind for confidence and action. If you want to train your brain for success, if you want to move from a life of hesitation and overthinking into a life of bold decisions and undeniable momentum, then you must understand that confidence is not something you wait to feel before you act. It is something you program into your mind through repeated action, repeated exposure, and repeated reinforcement until the belief in your own ability becomes so deeply wired into your identity that doubt, though it may still whisper, never holds the final word again. The greatest mistake people make when pursuing success is believing that they must feel fully confident before they can take meaningful action, believing that the absence of fear is the prerequisite for forward motion. But the truth is the opposite. It is action taken despite fear, action taken while doubt still lingers at the edges of your mind, action taken while your heart races and your voice shakes that builds true confidence. Because confidence is not the cause of action. It is the result of action. You must train your mind to understand that fear is not a stop sign, that uncertainty is not an alarm, that discomfort is not danger, but simply the natural emotional response of a brain stepping into unfamiliar territory. And rather than waiting for those feelings to vanish, you must learn to expect them, embrace them, and move forward with them in hand. knowing that every time you act despite fear, every time you step forward despite uncertainty, you are rewiring your brain, retraining your nervous system, building the very confidence you once thought you had to find elsewhere. This process begins with emotional rehearsal, with using the power of visualization, of mental simulation, to prime your brain for the experiences you want to create, because the mind, brilliant and malleable as it is, cannot easily distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. And every time you visualize yourself succeeding, acting boldly, speaking powerfully, creating outcomes aligned with your goals, you are planting seeds in your subconscious, seeds that, when watered through repetition and belief, grow into automatic patterns of confidence and action. Make it a daily practice, even just a few minutes each morning or night, to close your eyes, breathe deeply, and vividly imagine yourself moving through your day with confidence, tackling challenges with resilience, navigating setbacks with grace, making bold decisions with clarity, because every image you imprint into your mind becomes a blueprint your brain will seek to match in your real-life behaviors. Alongside visualization, you must train your mind through affirmations, not empty, mechanical repetitions, but emotionally charged declarations that reinforce the identity you are building, affirmations that speak directly to the version of yourself you are becoming. Speak words like, "I am bold even when I feel fear. I trust myself to figure it out. My actions create momentum and success. I move forward without waiting for perfect conditions." And do not merely whisper them. Speak them with authority. Speak them with feeling. Speak them with the belief that repetition is rewriting your internal code, because affirmations spoken with emotional engagement reach deeper into the subconscious, bypassing old resistance, creating cracks in the armor of doubt, allowing new beliefs to take root. But understand this: visualization and affirmation, powerful as they are only the primers, only the mental rehearsal. They must be coupled with real-world action to solidify the new programming, because the brain trusts evidence, the brain trusts experience, the brain wires most powerfully through doing, not just imagining. Therefore, you must build the habit of acting quickly on ideas, on instincts, on opportunities, before fear has time to mount a persuasive case for hesitation. Because the longer you wait, the louder fear becomes, the more doubt festers, the stronger old patterns pull you back into paralysis. Train yourself to act before you feel fully ready. Train yourself to move toward opportunities when excitement is fresh. Train yourself to embrace the discomfort of beginning poorly, imperfectly, but boldly, because every small, courageous act, every decision to move without guarantees, strengthens the neural circuits of confidence and weakens the circuits of fear and procrastination. Make courage a reflex. Make action a habit. Make movement your default response to uncertainty. And understand that the goal is not perfection. The goal is momentum, because success belongs not to those who get everything right the first time, but to those who refuse to stall, who refuse to let hesitation harden into regret, who choose movement over paralysis again and again until action itself becomes a source of strength. Another vital component of programming your mind for confidence and action is learning to celebrate effort, not just outcomes. Because if you only reward yourself for flawless victories, you'll train your brain to fear failure, to avoid risk, to stay small within the boundaries of guaranteed success. But if you make it a practice to celebrate every act of courage, every step into the unknown, every moment of perseverance, even when results are uncertain, you teach your brain that movement itself is success, that trying itself is triumph, and you build an internal environment where boldness thrives, where fear no longer holds the same paralyzing power. Every evening, take time to reflect, not just on what went perfectly, but on where you showed up with courage, where you acted despite fear, where you chose growth over comfort. And in doing so, you reinforce the identity of someone who moves forward, who tries, who persists. And perhaps most importantly, you must anchor all of this to a purpose greater than your fear, because when your reasons are strong enough, Your excuses lose their grip. When your vision is clear enough, your obstacles shrink in comparison. And when your why is rooted deep enough in your heart, no temporary setback, no fleeting discomfort, no passing doubt can derail your movement for long. Know why you want the success you seek. Connect it to your values, your dreams, your service to others, your desire to live fully and without regret. Because the brain, brilliant as it is, needs emotional fuel to sustain bold action, and purpose provides the most powerful fuel there is. In the end, programming your mind for confidence and action is not a single event, not a weekend of motivation, not a fleeting moment of inspiration. It is a lifestyle, a daily practice, a relentless commitment to choosing courage over fear, movement over hesitation, belief over doubt, until the mind you once fought against becomes the mind that carries you forward with power, with grace, with unstoppable momentum. You're not waiting for confidence. You are building it. You're not hoping for action. You are training it. You are not passively wishing for success. You are actively wiring your brain for it, thought by thought, word by word, action by action, day after day. And with every repetition, with every courageous step, with every decision to move despite the noise of fear, you are becoming the person who no longer waits for the perfect moment. You are becoming the person who creates it. Chapter 5. Design a Success Identity. If you truly wish to experience lasting transformation, if you seek to create not just fleeting wins, but a lifetime of momentum, fulfillment, and meaningful impact, then you must go beyond changing your habits, beyond shifting your daily thoughts. You must step into the deeper work of consciously designing your identity, because your behaviors, your emotions, your expectations are not random. They are all rooted in the story you tell yourself about who you are, and no matter how much effort you apply at the surface level, if you do not reshape the self-image living beneath your actions, you will always, eventually, sabotage your own progress to stay aligned with the identity you have not yet upgraded. Your brain is wired for consistency. It seeks to protect your self-concept at all costs because your identity provides a sense of safety, familiarity, and coherence. And even if that identity is limiting, even if it is based on outdated beliefs, your mind will cling to it with fierce loyalty unless you intervene. Unless you deliberately reimagine and rebuild the version of yourself you're committed to embodying moving forward. Most people remain trapped not by external limitations, but by internal allegiance to an outdated identity. The identity of the struggler, the underachiever, the unlucky one, the one who always gets close but never quite breaks through. And because they have rehearsed these roles for so long, because they have anchored them emotionally with past experiences, they unknowingly recreate the same cycles over and over, choosing behaviors, interpreting events, and filtering reality in ways that reaffirm the very story they wish to escape. To change your life permanently, you must change your story. To change your story, you must change your identity. To change your identity, you must begin now to think, feel, and act as the future version of yourself. Not someday, not when circumstances improve, but today before external results appear, because it is the inner shift that precedes the outer shift, never the other way around. The process of designing a success identity begins with deep clarity. Clarity about who you intend to become, not just what you want to achieve, because goals are powerful but fragile if they are not rooted in an identity that supports them. Ask yourself, with ruthless honesty, who is the version of me that easily achieves the outcomes I desire? How does that version of me think, believe, behave, move through the world? What values do they live by? What standards do they refuse to compromise? What emotions do they master rather than be mastered by? What habits are non-negotiable for them? What kind of self-talk fills their mind? Do not answer with vague hopes. Be vivid, specific, detailed, creating a mental blueprint so clear that your brain cannot help but begin to align your current behaviors with this emerging identity. Once you have this vision, the work becomes simple, though not always easy. Every day, in every choice, you ask yourself, what would the successful version of me do in this moment? What would the confident, resilient, unstoppable version of me choose right now? How would they speak, act, think, respond? And then you act accordingly. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but intentionally, consistently, until the gap between who you were and who you are becoming shrinks, until the new identity feels less like an aspiration and more like a homecoming, a natural, inevitable expression of the self you always knew you were capable of embodying. You must also reinforce this identity emotionally, because identity is not built by logic alone. It is anchored through feeling, through emotional association, through repetition charged with energy. Celebrate every small alignment with your new identity, every courageous choice, every disciplined action, every moment you act from belief rather than fear, because what is celebrated is reinforced, and what is reinforced becomes automatic. Speak to yourself as the new version of yourself. Not someday, but today. Affirm your new identity daily, vividly, with emotion. I am disciplined. I am powerful. I am resilient. I am a creator of success. I am the architect of my destiny. Train your mind to see yourself not through the distorted lens of past mistakes, but through the empowering lens of current choices and future possibilities. And understand this, designing a success identity is not about pretending to be something you are not. It is about shedding the false limitations you once believed were real and stepping fully into the strength, the brilliance, the resilience that has always been within you, waiting for permission to emerge. It is about aligning your actions with your aspirations, about becoming congruent, about moving through the world with the quiet, steady certainty that you are not chasing success. You are embodying it, living it, expanding it with every breath, every choice, every moment of deliberate self-leadership. This work will require patience, because the old identity, familiar and stubborn, will not disappear overnight. It will try to pull you back into old behaviors, old narratives, old fears, especially when you're tired, when you face setbacks, when success feels distant. But you must persist, you must hold the new standard firmly, you must refuse to negotiate with the old self, because every time you act in alignment with your future self, you weaken the grip of the past, and every time you slip and realign quickly, you reinforce the truth that change is happening, that evolution is inevitable. You must also protect your environment, because identity is shaped not only internally but externally by the voices you hear, the models you observe, the expectations you absorb. Surround yourself with people, environments, and inputs that affirm your new identity, that challenge you to rise, that normalize the level of excellence you are committed to living. Because no matter how strong you believe yourself to be, you are influenced by what you are immersed in. And you must curate your influences with the same fierce intentionality with which you curate your thoughts. And finally, you must anchor your identity not to external outcomes, but to internal commitments, because success rooted in results is fragile, vulnerable to the inevitable fluctuations of life. But success rooted in identity, in values, in unshakable self-respect becomes indestructible, immune to temporary defeats, resilient through seasons of doubt. You are not successful because of what you achieve. You are successful because of who you become in the process. And who you become is entirely within your control. You have the power, right now, to begin living as the person you're destined to be. You have the power, right now, to rewrite the story that once kept you small. You have the power, right now, to act, think, believe, move, and create from the identity of someone who succeeds, because success is not something they chase. It is something they embody. This is your work now, to live today as the future version of yourself, to act in alignment, to feel in alignment, to speak in alignment, because the life you dream of is not waiting for the perfect time, the perfect conditions, the perfect luck. It is waiting for the moment you finally decide to become the person who can claim it, not through force, but through congruence. Design your identity, embody your future, and let everything else, the results, the recognition, the rewards, follow naturally, inevitably, as reflections of the person you have already chosen to become. Chapter 6. Sustain and expand your mental mastery. Building a powerful mind. A mind capable of achieving extraordinary success and enduring inevitable setbacks is a tremendous accomplishment, but true greatness, the kind that lasts through seasons of adversity, through the highs and lows of life, through the shifting landscapes of opportunity and challenge, is not just about building strength once. It is about sustaining it, nurturing it, and expanding it continuously, intentionally, relentlessly, until it becomes not something you occasionally summon, but something that defines the way you move through the world without hesitation or apology. The reality is that life will always test you. Not once, not twice, but again and again, sometimes in ways you expect and prepare for, and other times in ways that blindside you, shake your foundations, and demand that you either rise to a new level of resilience or retreat into the safety of old limitations. And it is during these times, not during moments of ease and success, that your true mental mastery is forged and revealed. To sustain your mental mastery, you must first accept that growth is a lifelong commitment, not a season, not a phase, not something you do until you achieve a certain external milestone, but a fundamental part of who you are, woven into the very fabric of your identity. Because the moment you treat growth as optional, the moment you relax into complacency, the forces of entropy, fear, doubt, distraction, regression begin to creep back in, slowly at first, then all at once, until you find yourself wondering how you drifted so far from the edge you once fought so hard to reach. You must cultivate a mindset of daily renewal, the understanding that every day is a new opportunity to strengthen the pathways of resilience, courage, optimism, and self-leadership that you have been carefully, painstakingly building, and that if you do not actively feed those pathways, they begin to wither because mental strength, like physical strength, is a use-it-or-lose-it phenomenon. Every morning, before the noise of the world invades your mind, recommit to yourself. Recommit to your vision. Recommit to your values. Recommit to the habits that align with the highest version of yourself. Recommit to the standards you have chosen to live by, not the easy standards of the world around you, but the elevated standards that demand your best even when no one is watching. Sustaining mental mastery also requires a fierce vigilance over your inputs, because your mind is not an isolated system. It is shaped daily by what you consume, what you listen to, what you watch, what you allow to fill your emotional and cognitive space. And just as you would not pour poison into a well you drink from, you must be ruthless about protecting the wellspring of your mind from the toxins of negativity, fear, gossip, cynicism, and small thinking that saturate so much of the modern world. Curate your influences with the same care you would curate the air you breathe if you knew it determined your lifespan, because in many ways, it does. Feed your mind with books, ideas, conversations, and environments that stretch you, that challenge you, that affirm the reality of growth and abundance rather than scarcity and fear. Surround yourself with those who expect your greatness, not those who tolerate your mediocrity. Another essential practice for sustaining mental mastery is intentional reflection, not passive rumination, but active, structured reflection that helps you track your growth, refine your strategies, and realign with your deepest values and goals when the inevitable distractions of life pull at your focus. Set aside time weekly, monthly, and quarterly to review your progress, to celebrate your wins, to extract the lessons from your setbacks, to refine your habits, to sharpen your vision. Because mastery is not the result of unbroken success, but of continuous learning, continuous adaptation, continuous course correction guided by a clear understanding of where you have been, where you are, and where you are determined to go. Understand, too, that sustaining mastery means embracing evolution, because the tools, beliefs, strategies, and even dreams that serve you at one level may become constraints at the next, and you must be willing to release what no longer serves your highest growth, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it challenges your old identity, even when it requires mourning the person you once were to make room for the person you are becoming. Success at one level is often the greatest obstacle to success at the next, because what brought you here will not necessarily take you there. And sustaining mastery means being willing again and again to be a beginner, to be a student, to admit that there's always more to learn, more to refine, more to become. You must also guard against the silent killers of momentum, entitlement, and complacency. You must never mistake past victories for guaranteed future success. You must never assume that because you have done great things, you are immune to decline, to stagnation, to being outgrown by those who remain hungry while you rest on yesterday's achievements. Stay humble, stay hungry, stay awake. Finally, sustaining and expanding mental mastery means committing yourself to something bigger than yourself, to a vision, a mission, a purpose that transcends your own comfort, that demands your continued evolution, that pulls you forward with a force greater than fear, greater than fatigue, greater than the lure of the easy path. When your why is powerful enough, your how becomes inevitable. When your vision burns bright enough, your doubts shrink into insignificance. When your mission matters deeply enough, your excuses wither in the light of your commitment. You must live for something larger than survival, larger than status, larger even than personal success. You must live for contribution, for creation, for legacy, for the difference only you, with your unique gifts, your hard-earned wisdom, your cultivated resilience can make. And when you live this way, when you anchor your mental mastery not merely to what you can get, but to what you can give, you tap into a source of energy, of creativity, of perseverance that does not burn out, but renews itself endlessly through the act of serving something greater than yourself. You're not just training your brain for success. You're training it for impact. You're training it for leadership. You're training it for a life that echoes long after you are gone. Sustain your mastery by living in alignment with your highest values. Expand your mastery by stepping boldly into bigger challenges, bigger visions, bigger dreams. Protect your mastery by remaining humble, hungry, and disciplined. And remember always, you are the sculptor of your mind, the architect of your destiny, the author of the story still being written. And the greatest chapters, the chapters of triumph, of transformation, of legacy, are still ahead, waiting for the hands that refuse to grow weary, the heart that refuses to shrink, the spirit that refuses to surrender. Your mind is your masterpiece. Treat it with the reverence it deserves, and keep building. Conclusion. As we arrive at the end of this journey, I want you to pause for a moment and recognize how far you have already come. Because even if the results are not yet visible on the outside, even if the world has not yet seen the shifts happening within you, the very act of choosing to train your brain, to reshape your patterns, to rewrite the narrative you live by, marks a profound transformation that most people will never dare to attempt. And it is this internal shift, quiet, steady, relentless, that will, over time, create external changes far beyond anything you can yet fully imagine. You now know that success is not something that happens by accident, not something reserved for a lucky few blessed with better circumstances, but something that is built deliberately, thought by thought, habit by habit, belief by belief, until the mind that once worked against you becomes the mind that carries you, that lifts you, that makes success not just possible, but inevitable. You understand that your thoughts shape your emotions fuel your actions reinforce your identity, and your identity determines your destiny, and that by taking ownership at the root level, by mastering the unseen battles within, you change the visible reality without. You have learned that you are not your past. You are not your fears. You are not your old limitations. You are not the mistakes you once made, the doubts you once believed, or the ceilings others once placed above you. You are a builder. You are a creator. You are the architect of a future so much bigger, brighter, and more powerful than the small stories you once told yourself. You now know that success is not a destination. It is a way of being. It is a daily decision to think differently, to act courageously, to believe fiercely in your ability to grow, to adapt, to overcome, to rise higher, even when the odds seem stacked against you, even when fear knocks loudly at the doors of your mind. You know that confidence is built not through waiting, but through movement, that fear is not a wall, but a doorway, that failure is not a verdict, but a teacher, and that you, right now, have everything within you that you need to build a life that is not ruled by circumstance, but led by vision. You understand that building mental mastery is not a one-time event, but a lifelong practice, a commitment you renew every morning when you wake up and choose growth over comfort, action over hesitation, belief over doubt, contribution over selfishness. You have the tools now. The tools to reframe setbacks as stepping stones, the tools to challenge old thoughts and install new, empowering ones, the tools to design a success identity rooted not in shallow appearances, but in deep, unshakable truth. You have the knowledge now, the knowledge that your brain can change, that your mind can be trained, that your future is not written in stone, but sculpted by your own daily choices. But more importantly than the tools, more importantly than the knowledge, you have the awareness now, the awareness that the power has always been and will always be within you. No one else is coming to save you because you are the hero you have been waiting for. No one else can do the work for you because you are the builder of the mind that will create the life you desire. No one else can limit you unless you first give them permission. From this moment forward, everything you need is already inside of you. It is simply a matter of remembering, of choosing, of acting. Train your brain daily. Feed it possibility. Fuel it with courage. Nourish it with belief. Sharpen it with action. Refuse to live another day as a passive participant in your own life. Refuse to hand over your dreams to fear, to doubt, to the comfort of playing small. Refuse to be ruled by an old story that no longer fits the person you are becoming. You were made for more, and now you know how to claim it. Step forward with the mind of a builder, the heart of a warrior, the soul of a creator. Your future is not somewhere you find. It is something you build. And it begins, not tomorrow, not someday, but right now. On your mind, on your future, and never, ever look back.